Yeah, I just took it off the Wi-Fi and it got on my phone, so hopefully my phone will give me enough.
Get it on later.
Yeah. All right.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Everybody understands there's technological difficulties all the time. That's why it's called technology.
Isn't it wonderful?
Huh?
It is. Isn't
It is wonderful unless it messes up.
He loves it.
All right. Thank you for being here. Sorry I was having a little struggle, or I wasn't, but the internet was. So we're trying this with my telephone service. So appreciate y'all being here today. We are in our third session of teaching from the book of Acts. If you're new here, I'm doing what I call a metaphysical understanding of the Acts of the Ekklesia, or we could actually say the movement in action. That's because that's what the Logos is. And today we're going to start with chapter 2, verse 1 through 5. I hope all of you read my post about we were watching the Olympics the other day, and they were doing the opening, and one of the ladies there was from Africa. I think she was the president of getting it all together in Italy. And she made a comment, I can't pronounce the word, I've got it on my Facebook, but she said, we have a word in Africa, and it means I am because you are. That's what she said. I am because you are. And that really got my attention, because it really is true. You know, if I'm off by myself, I'm really nothing, you know, on an island by myself or whatever. But when we're all together, you know, I wrote on there, you know, I'm a grandpa because I have grandchildren, and I'm a friend because I have friends and all that. And it really is a powerful statement, showing how important it is for us all to know that we're one with each other, have relationships with one another. So I liked it a lot. I enjoyed it. Hope y'all been watching the Olympics. It was very inspiring the other day. They're calling for love and calling for oneness, and pretty powerful. So in Acts 2, 1 through 5, I'm going to read this, and I'm not reading from the King James Version, so most of you know that. It says, and when the day of Pentecost had fully come, they were all in harmony and alignment in one inward place. And suddenly there came a vibration like the sound of a mighty flowing wind from the invisible realm, and it filled the entire house of their gathered awareness. And there appeared to them expressions as of the Logos of the Word, resting upon each one, igniting their awareness and understanding with revelation and remembrance of what Jesus taught them. And they were all moved with a breath of the eternal presence. It began to speak from within, each expressing as the breath gave voice of agape through the sacred self. Now dwelling in the outer realm of Jerusalem were seekers from every level of awareness under the spiritual awareness, drawn to the vibration of what was being revealed. And so in this allegory here of this, the day of Pentecost is the moment in man's awareness when they begin to experience inner revelation. We've talked about this before here, but it's the revelation where the Logos voice begins to speak within. And to me, that's a powerful moment. It's not a breath from without, but it's that awakening to the breath that has always been within you. You know, I'm 75 years young, and I've studied most of my life since 1988. And I can't tell you the majority of that time I properly heard. I know I heard, but I don't hear like I do today. And there came a time about 10 years ago where literally I had my day of Pentecost, or my day of the Lord, or my last day, where I finally had tuned in and got to the point where I could focus more and more on what I was doing. And that breath quickened me. And that's what it does. It's the eke within our awareness, the point where movement and action takes place, and it quickens our understanding, and then it's filling our upper room. Our upper room, it's not necessarily a divine mind, but it's our conscious awareness, because the divine mind already knows everything. But literally it fills our upper room part of us. So the day of Pentecost means far more than a Hebrew feast like we were taught. It symbolizes the fullness of spiritual preparation with a divine timing when it meets our inward alignment. And Pentecost means fifth, and 5 represents spiritual movement and fullness of divine activity. So the moment that this moment reveals that there's a complete cycle of inner transformation that we all go through. And to realize that people are in different cycles. And that's why we have to give them, grace and don't get upset with people, and then gradually give them what they can take, and don't dump the whole dump load all at once on people. So to be in one accord in one place means that all divine faculties, the faith, the love, the wisdom, the imagination, the understanding, and more, they are come together in unity, and they're functioning in unity. I always say to you that you can't function out of any of this without the fruit of the Spirit. You have to have love. Because if you don't have love, then you use these actions sometimes for your self-benefit, or your ego uses those. And so the awareness was aligned and at rest, and they were prepared for breath to flow freely because they were in the upper room waiting. They wasn't sure what they were waiting for, but they felt the need to go there, and so they were waiting, and this is what took place. So the sound from heaven is not a literal wind, although it can feel like it, but it's a spiritual vibration. That's some, we've had times in our life where we're praying or we're listening to a message or whatever, and we feel this vibration. I remember I've told you guys about years ago when I was driving, Don and I was driving down to Brother Garner's in Arkansas to go to their conference, and they were going to teach on the year of Jubilee, and or I was listening to it, whatever. But all of a sudden I just began to shake all over and vibrate inside of me. And I just asked Father what was going on, and really that's what was happening. My very spirit within inside of me, my breath was vibrating, and it was that movement. There was this excitement there. What I had been feeding on was blessing me. And so it fills the house when that happens. It fills the house consciousness. It fills the collective awareness of those that, again, that are present in one accord. And they don't have to be with you to be present. When people are present and are aware, we're all connected. It may be people that you don't even know, but you're literally, there's this, it affects the whole world. And that's why we all need to come together. And they said this at the Olympics, we need to all come together in one accord. And they were confirming the fact that all the Olympians there had agreed to do that, to come together in one accord, to love one another. If one falls, to pick them up, to help them, to cheer them on. And so this inward sound is the quickening of breath. It's the evidence that the voice of breath then is rising. It's not noisy. It's not chaotic, but it's transformative. It changes your life. Have you ever had an experience before where you saw something or whatever that literally it changed your entire life? It just riveted you. And so this is a filling of every space where divine alignment exists in our being. And then fire here symbolizes purification. It symbolizes enlightenment to the Logos word without mixture. And the cloven tongues, better understood as separated expressions, resting upon them represents individual expressions of divine awareness. I have an expression. You have an expression. I speak one way. You speak another way. I say contact with the divine mind. Somebody else says Christ. Whatever it is that you say, you have an expression, but also you have an expression of your entire being. And like the lady was talking about, you, whatever you are, it makes me, right? I am because you are. And so you literally are part of my life. Everybody around us literally is part of our life. And if people can begin to see this, that can change the world. It can change the way people are treating each other out there in their day-to-day lives. And the tongues did not burn, they illuminated. They illuminated with fire. They brought clarity, basically, with what Jesus had taught. So they began to speak and begin to remember what Jesus taught them. And eternal presence within them made that become alive and brought understanding to them. So they brought clarity there, and what had once been external to the people and the Pharisees and even the disciples, teaching now became internal revelation. They understood it. And so this was not giving a new truth, but it was remembering what had always been true. We're not learning anything new. It may be new to us, but it's always been true. There's a verse in the Bible that says we have a new life, which that's translated wrong. Kelly was telling me the other day here that she has a new life because of she's a new creation. And I said, no, hon, you're not a new creation. You've always been who you are. You're just awakening to that.
It's the mental creation that's new.
Right.
It's the emotional, mental, not the physical.
Yeah, you're beginning to recognize it. So being filled with the breath of Holy Presence means there's an entire being that becomes saturated with awareness of our union. And they were no longer speaking from memory, no longer speaking from tradition. They now spoke as breath moved them. And once the voice moved them, then they spoke. And like Jesus said, he functioned out of this because he said, I don't say anything that I don't see Father. And that's what they said in the Bible, Father, but eternal presence say. And that's really good, because if we can get to that where it's not important that I say something every time. That's big for me, isn't it? But it's not important to say something every time unless I know that this is what breath is saying, or breath wants to speak to me. And so each person began to speak truths in this upper room, and in a way that it resonated to the listeners that were around them. And this is how breath works. It speaks through us in our voice, yet it carries a frequency that other people can understand on their level, because some people aren't necessarily on the same frequency that we're at, but we can speak at their level, then it can bring them up. And that's what Jesus did for a long time. The disciples were not connected with his frequency, and he had to talk in parables and talk to them as little children and things like that. But later on, as we saw in the book of John, he finally stopped doing that, and he began to speak to them clearly because he knew it was time for them to understand. So the term dwelling in Jerusalem refers to those who were near the spiritual center, but not yet fully awakened. These were seekers from every nation. Nations represent the awareness of man. So they're from all different awarenesses. And that represents the diversity of awareness. Every nation under heaven points to this full range of sacred self-consciousness. It points to different levels of spiritual hunger, to religious tradition. These individuals were drawn to this sound, which is not necessarily audible, but it's a sound that you hear within inside. You know, have you ever heard a voice, a breath, but it wasn't through your ears, but sometimes it sounded like it? You know, you ever hear your name called very much? I do quite often. I'll hear Roy. You know, I'll be in there and it just gets my attention. Sometimes I come in and say, Donna, did you call me? She said, no. So I know what it is. And so that happens when you're tuned into the voice. And so as a reminder, Pentecost is a symbol of spiritual movement, a symbol of spiritual action, and it's the full release of the divine activity after this inner season of preparation. So we, people who are studying from other spiritual teachers, we're being prepared for this movement that needs to take place in action. When I was looking at my title for the book of Acts, I had wished I put on the book of action and movement, because that's what it is, action and movement. And that's what we're studying, is the action and the movement of the disciples and the people at that time. And so I'm going to use the word battle, but I don't mean battle, but we're being prepared for a great battle. And the battle is, it's not going to be hard, the battle is to help people release everything that's not expedient to them and their awareness. And there are people all over the world that's been prepared for that. They're not in churches necessarily. They don't teach live on Facebook. They're out there on Facebook, but they're out there everywhere. And they're getting it, and it's just getting stronger and stronger. I'm getting people writing to me, I'm really understanding this now. I have one sister that struggled a lot reading some of my writings and Kay's writings and others. And day before yesterday, I made a post, and she's from my wisdom book, and she said, you know what? I'm really getting this now. And she said, my problem was I wanted it right now. But you know, she has all that we're talking about, but she don't necessarily understand it all right now. But the more you study, the more you read, the more you listen, It's from glory to glory that have been changed. And that glory means view and perception. The first thing you've got to do is learn about what the eternal presence thinks about you. And then once you can do that, then you can change what you think about other people. You begin to see them as you. And we need them. I need my neighbors. I love my neighbors. I enjoy them. I sometimes try to connect with some and they don't want to connect. But I would love to know everybody in this neighborhood. I was thinking about this the other day. There was I think it was some movie or something I watched, but their community, they had a community, and they got together once a week, and they all got together, like in a park or something, and they ate together, and they would dance together, and they would, howl at the moon, do all kinds of stuff together. And I thought, what? Well, yeah, people, me and Allie are moon lovers, play drums. But what I thought about that, can you imagine how wonderful that neighborhood was? How just getting together.
Yes.
I mean, look at our group. We get together once a week, and we're just the most awesome people in the world, aren't we? But how they treat one another because they connect. And I believe the eternal presence, Father, whatever you want to say, is drawing this world together in a way that we can't even imagine. People want this. They really do. Even people that are mean, they don't want to be mean. It's just things that's happened to them. So these 5 verses here reveal this divine process of this inner awakening leading to our outer expression. It's not any good to have something if it can't be drawn from outwardly, if we don't release it outwardly. It shows us that when the faculties of awareness are in harmony, then spiritual movement and action can take place. And so no one is excluded, though. Every individual becomes a conduit of breath, each one speaking of the divine moved through them, speaking the understanding that they have. So we don't all have to say the same thing, but it needs to point to the same thing. And so this was not the beginning of something new. It was the unveiling of what's always been, the expression of the manifestation of sons and daughters. We've always been that, but now it's multiplied in every person whose awareness returns to the voice within. And that's why we're always saying, go within, go within, go within. And that's all it is. It's not, it's not like trying to find a place to go within. It's just quit looking outside of you. And, the way you do that, sometimes you have to shut your eyes. Sometimes you have to speak something else. I write so much, I study so much. When I go to bed, I see all this text, and I try to shut it down sometimes. And so last night, it was all my text was there, and it was just my eyes are shut, and I finally just pushed it away. I said, I want to see nothing. I'm going to just see nothing, and I'm going to sleep well. And literally, it was like a curtain. It just pushed it over. And it tried to sneak back again. But I spoke to myself, and I said, I don't need to see this now. I want to see nothing. And I believe we can speak to ourselves. I don't want to think about this anymore. It has nothing to do with it anymore. It has no power in my life whatsoever. And we can literally train our brain to allow us to have peace and relaxation and don't see all that stuff all the time. It's like the first time we played Quirkle. Remember that? And so the several nights when we slept, Carl, all we could see is those pieces. You remember that? That went on for a week with me. So Acts 2:6-11. Now, when this spiritual vibration moved forth, many gathered in awakened curiosity, and each one began to hear the voice of eternal presence expressed. I need to fix that right there. Remind me to fix that eternal, Don. I put an L on there. Eternal presence expressed in the understanding of their own inner understanding. And all were astonished, saying, Look, are not these who speak Galileans? Then how is it that each of us hears these divine expressions and the understanding of our own sacred self? Corinthians, Medes, I'm going to pronounce these, but I'm sure it's not right. Elamites, who dwell in Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Pergama, Pamphylia, Egypt, and parts of Libya near Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both those of Jewish tradition and those newly embracing spiritual awareness. Cretans and Arabians, we all hear them declaring the mighty works of the eternal presence in our own inward language. That's what was going on. They were not speaking in tongues. We were taught that all of our life, that they had received the gift of the Holy Spirit and they were speaking in tongues and everybody could understand them. It wasn't. They could understand the way they spoke. Literally, the divine mind opened up to them and they could understand spiritually what they were saying. And there's a verse in the Bible that says, I will give them a quick understanding. Back when we had Tree of Life Fellowship here in Moore, and I was studying under Brother Garner, and I had gone through all those series. You probably can't even imagine what I taught you guys. I mean, I'm a serious teacher, not a serious, but I'm a serious teacher, and we've gone through book after book after book after book, and one day I said, Father, how are the new people going to catch up with us? And I heard this so plainly, I will give them a quick understanding. And I believe these people were given a quick understanding. I believe the disciples were sharing and teaching what Jesus taught with perfect clarity. So the movement of eternal presence is a vibrational release from awakened awareness, and it calls every aspect of ourselves to attention, to hearing. All of a sudden, what didn't sound familiar, all of a sudden it sounded familiar. All of a sudden, what didn't make sense, then it made sense. Just like this young lady on Facebook, she said, this makes sense now. I understand. It did, what I said made sense, but her ear wasn't tuned yet. And so what we have to do is we have to nail our ear to the door, and the door is the revelation of the Logos. And when we nail our ear and we focus our ear to that, and we let go of all the obstructing sounds, then we begin to hear. And so each one hears in their own understanding. That's basically a universal truth, a divine truth. When divine truth is spoken, people can hear it. If they're wanting to. So the question here, are not these who speak Galileans, reveals limiting perceptions of outer awareness. Galilee represents the outer circle or the outer court awareness, often viewed as a surface level and redemptive view. Sometimes we think they can't hear, but they can. You know, I've had a lot of people tell me, well, you can't, over the years, I can't bring you into my church because my people won't understand you. Well, and I almost every one of them, so first of all, they're not your people. And they didn't like that too much. But I said, they're not your people. I said, you are a messenger of God. These are God's people. That's how I said it to them. But they still didn't let me go. But I think what it was saying, I don't understand what you're saying. I think that's what they were saying. I don't understand. And for some reason, a lot of preachers think that if I don't know, then they can't know. They can't understand. That's not true. So there's no doctrine. There's no filter. There's no tradition. When you begin to hear these truths, it's just unmistakable and unmistakable of the voice of eternal presence speaking through the sacred self. You cannot deny it when you're hearing that voice. It's powerful. So in religious thought, it was unexpected that divine revelation would come to those who seem ordinary. But you know, Elohim, when you look up Elohim, it says gods in the ordinary sense. Now, I didn't like that because I thought we're not ordinary. But ordinary means they're not necessarily the priests. They're not necessarily other types of gods. They're people. It should have said gods in the people sense. And so this verse exposes how egoic consciousness expects truth to flow through high places, polished tradition, authority figures. You know, in the past I've been asked, by what authority do you do this? You know, when I translate the scriptures, I've had a lot of ministries ask me, particularly in that group we used to follow, who are you to do this? Well, I'm Roy Richmond. I'm the son of God. Just like you're so-and-so. You're a son of God. You're a daughter of God. You know, do I have to go to Bible college to be able to hear voice? You know, I studied. I had a powerful, and I still have it, Bible program that shows me how the words were added. It shows me the meanings of the words. That's how I do it. And today I know it's all about love, and if it's not love, it's not Father. So my degrees have nothing to do with what I'm teaching today. I'm proud of them. I'm glad I have them. You know, a psychologist talked to me the other day, and she said, "You have 2 doctorates and 3 masters," and she was just really impressed. She said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a teacher." You know, but it doesn't matter who you are. You can be a child.
Yes.
You can be a little child that's stayed in tune and have great understanding. I've seen videos, YouTube videos of little bitty kids, 4 or 5 or 6 years old, speaking spiritual truth as because they stayed in contact with the divine mind. So the question, the hearing within our clarity really expresses all. How is it that everyone is receiving clarity? We could say, how is it that all these people are not going to church and they're learning these things? It's because they're in tune.
Yes.
They're in tune. They got tired of the old ways. They got tired. Nothing was working. And so they decided to go other places, and they found out that there are other places besides church buildings. There's other books besides Christian bookstores. And they're searching those things. So this is why spiritual communication requires no translation. In other words, somebody didn't have to translate what those people were saying to them. Like, you know, we talk in tongues, and there's a translation of that. And I'm not speaking against it. There were some real times there. But if the truth is spoken, everybody can understand it. And the voice of breath is always heard at the listener's readiness of frequency. You have to be ready. That's why many places in John we saw where eternal presence spoke, and Jesus heard it, but the disciples did not, or spoke to Paul, he heard it, and the people, all they heard as sound is because they weren't in tune to hear that. The Apostle Paul was brought up to that place where he could hear. Jesus lived in that place, but other places said, oh, it was just wind, or oh, it's just somebody talking in tongues. We don't understand what it means. And so the list of nations and cities are allegorical here. These represent various states of consciousness, our inner territories of the sacred self that have been scattered or fragmented by religious systems. That's mainly what's really scattered us, was religious systems. And then culture doctrines, carnal awareness. So now under the influence of breath, they're being gathered into harmony. And, you know, all these cities, I normally explain all of them, but they're in the book. I'm not going to go through the detail explaining the names of them. But Acts 2, 6 through 11 reveals that when the breath of eternal presence moves through aligned awareness, it speaks directly to you.
Yes.
Directly to you. You will not doubt it. No matter how far we feel that we've wandered, when you allow breath to speak to you, you will know it's breath. And you'll hear this is the way. Walk you in it. And so every name and every city mentioned in here portrays an aspect of the collective sacred self being restored to oneness. And this was not a miracle of one language being understood. It was an indication of awakening. And that's what's going on in the world today. That's what needs to go on in the world today. We all need to be stirred to oneness. I really feel that. Oneness, not just me one with God, but me one with everyone, because everyone is the eternal presence. And so I exist because you exist as eternal presence. And once we all do that and begin to pull together, how happy we will be, right? We'll be able to help the world. And so this group pictures those in transition. They're moving from tradition into transformation, asking not only what they heard, but how it will change them. It's one thing to hear something, but it also is important to know that this changes you. What I've learned over my lifetime has changed me tremendously as how I see people, how I treat people, all kinds of things that I do in my life. It changes me. It's helped me through these rare diseases that I have, that a lot of people would have just cratered, would have stopped everything. I'm not bragging on myself, but when you know who you are and you know who your source is, you don't have to fall prey to that kind of stuff. And I had to go to a psychiatrist. I said already that they wanted to prove to me that I was depressed. And I know I'm not depressed. And the lady said, "You're not depressed." I said, "Thank you. I knew that already." So I had to pay you for that. My insurance company. So the second group responds from carnal perception. Their interpretation is mockery. They begin to mock them. They said, "These people are full of sweet wine." You know, they thought they were drunk. Huh?
There's another word for that.
Yeah. And if you've ever been in a charismatic church, it can look like we were drunk. We called it drunk on the Holy Ghost.
Holy Spirit.
Yeah. But they picture, let's see. Okay, so this is the response of those who are still bound in sense awareness. And they see everything through religious filters. I promise you, there are a lot of people out there, a lot of my friends that love me that think I'm pretty crazy. And when I say things to them, it's just like, you know, or they just don't say nothing. They're just listening. Why? Because they're filtering what I'm saying through their religious belief systems. This doesn't match up with this. You know, it's like having a computer with the wrong language in it, wrong information, and I try to type the correct thing, it would say, "This does not compute." And that's what they're saying to us. Their brain is saying, "This does not compute, so it must not be true." And that's the big mistake. Just because you don't understand it does not mean it's not true. And so mockery in this context is the ego's defense mechanism. It's trying to explain away the eternal presence of breath because it threatens control of a belief system. Most belief systems have control over their people. And they're not going to let them get out of that. And I always remember Elaine Hunt. Before she came to our church, she went to a church in Arizona, and she began to be hungry for more things. She went to her pastor and said, "What does this mean? I don't understand it." And he said, "That's not meant to be known now. We'll know that when we go to heaven." You know, that's because he didn't understand. But also sometimes it's things that if it was explained, it would free them from the bondage to religion. I don't mean just going to church you're in bondage, but some of the belief systems that you have, you're in bondage, and it holds you back. So those open to this sacred awareness, some awakened, some resisted. But the ones that were open were humbled, and they become hungry. And those operating in inherited awareness of religious direction, they often dismiss it, or they distort what was said, or they add to what was said. I've had people before say I said something I didn't say at all. And so to be astonished represents a moment when the sacred self is confronted with truth beyond previous experience. It's the beginning of inner expansion. There's nothing wrong with being astonished. Because to me, when I hear something that astonishes me, well, it's amazing. All these people can hear? You know, so I want to be the person that will teach me, explain it to me. So those who mock them symbolize resistance. When awareness is not yet open, the ego's voice responds with sarcasm, criticism, and carnal intellect argument. And we experience a lot of that. The biggest carnal intellect argument is I went to Bible college, and this is what I learned, and this is what it says. That's carnal intellect argument. Arguing with the breath, with the voice. So sweet wine represents external stimulation or emotion. The crowd assumes they're drunk because they interpret that excitement and that action and that movement and the voice of the disciples through a lens of sense. You know, sometimes you can see people that's drinking a little bit of alcohol, and you think they're drunk, and they're not really drunk. They're just having fun. You know, maybe it loosened up just a little bit, but they're having fun. Well, guess what? We can have fun in the church. We can dance if we want to. We can shout if we want to. I mean, a lot of this stuff is worth shouting to the rooftops, and I'm not against that whatsoever. They could hear, though. The other ones, they could hear because they were individuals who were immersed in the logos of the word. And I wish I would give anything if preachers would listen to us who are teaching and begin to teach the logos of the word. Begin to question yourself. Is what you're teaching your congregation, is it bringing them the law of abundant life? Do they walk out of your church feeling full and having everything they need? Do they walk out there with full peace? Do they walk out knowing that they're one with Father?
Yes.
Not a lot of people do that. They don't. So Acts 2:12-13 unveils a spiritual contrast here. As the eternal presence breath begins to sound through awakened awareness, the sacred self within each listener must decide this: will I lean in and receive, or will I pull back and resist? That's a choice we have to do. You know, and again, I know many people, and they're not strangers. The strangers listen to me, but my friends don't. I don't get it. I guess it's where it said like Jesus said, you're not welcome in your own place. You know, Jesus was Jesus. He was just a carpenter, and he wasn't welcome there. But when people know you so well, it's just like, how can you know all this stuff? I mean, why doesn't the pastor teach us this? If the pastor's not teaching, it's not true. And so you're making a decision. You're going to resist. One group is in awe, their heart stirred and ready to receive. The other mocks and are still anchored in the illusion of separation and outer performance. So this is the timeless tension between the ascending of awareness and the sacred self, or the fading voice of inherited identity. And those two choices are what we must make. I don't know about you, but I'm happy to be out of that. Amen? All right, I'm going to stop here. And we'll start back next week with Acts 2:14-15. So if any of you would like the transcript, I offer this all the time, of these teachings, write me and I can tell you how you can get them. Instead of sending out weekly, I'm sending a chapter at a time. So I send it to you as a PDF file and you can read it. So we love you all. Kay, I'm glad you're here with us today. Kay is going to be teaching this evening for the first time in about a month, so make sure and tune into her as she's teaching allegorical understanding in the book of Revelation, and it's very good. So we love you guys. We bless you. I didn't ask for the stars here again. Facebook did that. So if you want to give me a star, I'll appreciate it. I'll wear it proudly. Love you very much. Bye-bye.